Well, we're not even dry from the last segment of the last video, but this is the first segment of the next video in which we're going to place the cabinet boxes, put some equipment in place, get started with the overhead construction for the range hood and some other sort of, we're going to get the upper cabinets in, get the lights switching, and start looking at being able to use the space so we can tear this thing down and turn this area into more job site. But to start with, we got to make some room in and around the rest of the house by getting the cabinet boxes, all of which that we can placed on the toe kick. And for now, we're going to skip or give ourselves the ability to get back in and deal with these ducts so that we've got a more narrow and wider orifice to get us up and away from the finished floor. So we'll place the other boxes, and I'm going to get the finished plumbing done with this sink. And that way, all I've got to do is the rough connections in the basement. At that time, then it will quickly shut down the existing kitchen and start up the new kitchen sink. And then with the stove rolled into place and the hood suspended and the pipe going outside and the gas connected and the oven plugged in and the fridge plugged in over here, most of the things that you need to use a kitchen and, kitchen light will be here, and we can commence to, like I say, shutting down the other kitchen. So as a 1.5 man show, I have to be careful about how much time customers go without their infrastructure. And so this has been a long time coming, 3 or 4 months of, kind of full-time work as we could get here. And so now the time has come to really start seeing this thing come together. So enjoy this video. I think this is going to be one of the more satisfying pieces to this playlist. So let's get going. Okay, so now we're going to skip right through the attachment of any of these boxes any further than just having set them in place as a strategy to continue to get a plywood top that will help us to carry the faucet and allow this whole situation to basically keep moving to a point where they could use this space. So we decided that we've got some 24-inch, I think half-inch plywood, ripped at 24 inches already. That he had from something else Tim did. So you really want 25, because these I think are exactly 24 to start with, but we're going to put a 74.25-inch piece from here to the wall that'll be kind of flush with this, and we establish that from there to put another piece to sort of the middle of the back of the sink. We could get that out of an 8-footer, and from there to the end here we could get out of the other 8-footer. So, then we'll just need a little piece of something to go over there, but we can get what we need out of 4 rips, 2 full sheets, stuff that he already had already, which is even nicer, even sweeter deal. And it's just temporary. So he's bringing that up now, and we'll place it. And then I've traced out where I think they want to be tangent to this curve. So the sink has a smaller curve at the back and a larger curve at the front, which is the curve they want. And then I set it even side to side. And we've also, where the curve stops and the straight side begins will be where this gets capped with a custom piece that Tim will have to scribe for that. And so then I laid this hole out in pencil. We're going to lift the sink out, and I'm going to drill on this center, but I'll drill a nice big hole saw hole just so there's plenty of room to make all the connections we've got to make under here. And this is where we set this other stringer that supports the weight of the sink overall. We put that back so that that opening will be about between here and the skirt board at the front. So again, all the space that we would would like to have for the garbage grinder in that. And we're gonna have to come through from the side for the dishwasher and stuff, which we've discussed. So I'll show you that when we get there. But for now, we're gonna get the sink back out of here and just put this plywood up. Look at that. Sweet. Very nice. Yeah, let's you and me measure out and figure where that notch has gotta go. Okay, Tim's going to pop drawers and doors in, or drawer boxes at least, drawer boxes, I should say. I have an index of hole saws, so I just found one to work as a center translating punch. So it just fits that opening almost perfectly, and then I could trace the circle opening in it, and then eyeball a little dot in the center of that, and that allows me to get pretty close to a center that I'm happy enough to drill. So now we'll get that sink out of there, and I'll drill that. And I got to pop open the faucet and find out what sized hole they want on the center line at the back to mount it to. And then I think I'm gonna have to drill through the surface that the sink is sitting on too, some kind of clearance hole to get the sink hoses, the water supply hoses to come through it, and the counterweight, because I think their faucet has, if I'm not mistaken, one of the dongle ends on it where the tip becomes a separate thing. So we'll look at that. But then we can live without the sink for a little bit until we're basically ready to come back and plumb it all in. Well, today I came out with like 2 bags of what amounts. It's not really punch list. It's kind of just assembly stuff. So I don't know if this video will end up being called assembly or what, but you know, I have a full kit for garbage grinder, which has got everything for 2 sink drains, which these days it's less common. People are going with a bigger single drain, single basin, whatever. But the handiest thing to do is to have more than what you need anyway for something like this. So that'll work well for us. And then I also got down tubes. I guess I set them aside already as needing to be returned because you used to, here they are. You used to plug your dishwasher into the side of the down tube from the drain itself. I didn't know if we had a 7/8 or a 5/8 connection for the dishwasher, but upon closer inspection here, their kind of nice Sinkerator garbage grinder, that actually is where the dishwasher plugs in right into it, so we won't need to have that type of a connection here. Okay, and so that stuff can go back. Oh, careful there, kiddo. Now, we got the covers on the utility outlets, the outlets that you don't see, all the gray face plates and stuff. And so now I'm going to finish putting the water shutoff valves on. Tim got the copper cut back about 1 inch from the finished back wall of the cabinet, which will leave room for a flange. And where is it? I just got it. Here it is. This is what I forgot to get because all it takes is a couple things and you can't finish because this has got to go on first. And then you can do the push to connect, shut off valve, and etc. So I just ran around the corner and got those. So I neglected to get them. Another thing that you're going to want is a box flange. And so I did get, I got a box flange and something else. What do they call this? So this is a box flange. And that will be kind of in the event that this component to the rough plumbing, the adapter, sticks too far out of the wall because you don't have a perfect circumstance. This finishes that, and kind of you can be way out of the wall with it because it's nice and deep. If you want to be a show off, like I try to be, this is a different, do they call this a box flange? Deep flange. However, it's more swept and streamlined, and you can kind of show off the fact that you had that set to the right level. But actually, I won't be able to use that because it doesn't quite accommodate the situation for us. So we will be using the box flange. So there you go. Hubris. That bites you the moment you try something. And we need some painted zip screws to attach our vent for outside up here when I come cutting through there. If you recall, that plastic box that I put into the siding is pretty narrow. And so the whole layout for this will work on it. And every other thing that I got, like this thing here, is significantly wider. You know, this is white plastic again, so it's cool. You know, in one way it would look clean, but in another way, right, it's the whole layout is a lot wider. So if we're lined up on the left, we've got another inch or more. The camera's messing with it, but it's at least an inch, if not more, wider with the whole layout, which won't work on that plastic thing outside. So you kind of have to have everything around. And anyway, I'm going to use those painted white zip screws to go into the plastic. And if I don't like that, that's off the surface of the plywood by like 1.5 inches, and I'll have to use an incredibly much longer screw to get down to the plywood sheathing if I end up wanting to do it that way. So we've got some variables there. Now here, I want to put the pot filler up, and they want no more than 1/2 inch of threading out past the finished surface of the wall. Now, in our case, we're going to add tile, so we're going to have theoretically a 1/4 inch of thin set, or 1/8 inch, 3/16 thin set, and 1/4 to 5/16 thick tile. And so essentially, we're going to add 1/2 inch to this surface, and that will be our finished wall surface. However, the way that this thing works is I kind of have to represent that. I can't just kind of leave this out in space and bring the tile in around it and then slip the scutcheon, the beauty scutcheon can't be slid down against the tile because this has to go on. And by the time this goes down and gets screwed to kind of anchor this whole thing, I've slid off of the body of this unit, and I'm clattering around this diameter, which it no longer fits. So it's got to have a set screw cut into this thing. So what am I saying? I've got to have this thing sit down onto a representational 1/2 inch, but that stuff, that thickness can't be any bigger around than this, right? Because this has got to go over it and come down to the wall. So what I've got to do is I've got to make a custom kind of thick washer, a hair under the outside diameter, a hair over this inside diameter, and I got to translate these holes onto it, and then that will go on, and then the screws that they gave me are also not going to be long enough as a result of this, because I've got to get through whatever this is. Time I've got 1/8 of an inch or something I'm consuming there. Then I got a 1/2 for that washer, I got a 1/2 for drywall, and then it's another 1/2 of an inch to the wood that the drop ear is attached to. So they're nowhere near long enough, but they're like a number 8 screw, because you got to be careful to start with. The through hole in this thing is only so large, but this is what they supplied, and that's the way that it sits. So it isn't super like nice. It doesn't have a countersink in it, but I've got to copy that, right? I just have to have a longer screw. So I got these, are number 8 by 2.5 premium exterior trim screw. So they're a stainless steel. They've got a Torx drive, but the head geometry is going to be similar. So I had to get a whole pack of them, whatever, 35, because I need 4. And you want to remember that the PEX comes into the drop here at the bottom, so don't go putting these holes oriented like that and screw right through their PEX at the bottom. We're going to have to be, our whole layout's going to have to be like that. So I'll probably take this with me and try to make this at home on the bench, the 1/2 inch washer that I need. And I probably make them from plastic because it needs to be rigid, but I don't want it crumbling from being pressed. And we're going to sandwich everything here. And I could make it out of plywood, but we're dealing with water and stuff, and I just assume not. So either really like a 9 or a 12 layer plywood, like a really fine cabinet grade plywood. Maybe I'll see if Tim's got a scrap, something like that in the basement just in case. But I'll see if I can't find some PVC or some ABS or something like that to make it at home on the bench. So we're stalled out there, but I am going to get the water connections on here. And then I went with, now the hole through the floor for the HVAC, now we're pivoting, so stay with me, but the hole through the floor was a 3 1/4 by 10, and so I turned with a 3 1/4 by 10 elbow, and I made 3, and I bought 3 1/4 by 10 duct to get us out the front of the toe kick. But as you can imagine, if we come in, it's under there's 3/4 inch hardwood, but if we're at 3/4 inch hardwood and stuff, and we have to put a finishing register cover on here with a flanged face, if we come in there, we're not going to be able to, we're going to crash into the finished floor. So I was going to go to 2 by 12 and remake this whole thing, but instead you can actually have 2 by 10. So we'll restrict the flow a little bit here, but with 2 by 10 we can go right in what we've currently got. If I had 2 hands, believe me, it would work. And we can go up with it, and we'll be able to get our finished floor in, and we'll just be, just a hair off of it. And we'll cut this opening, the 2 by 10, we'll cut into the beauty, toe kick applicated, piece, or the applique, I want to say, but we're going to have an unfinished hardwood veneer plywood strip that will get finished to match these cabinets, and then applied to the front of that raw toe kick. It'll cover all the adjustment holes for the of the easy levelers, and we'll remake the opening, like I say, high and at 2 inches tall, so that fits nicely in it. And that'll be our solution to that debacle with the finished floor. So I was happy about that. This kind of craftsman, arts and crafts style kind of geometry to this is neat. They have some herringbone ones that would be a special order, which I'd kind of prefer. And I'd rather not the dark color if I could do more of an antique brass or antique bronze. So I just wanted to make sure that the units themselves would function in the logistical ways. Maybe we'll upgrade or change the look of those or whatever. So, and we're certainly not ready to put them into place. So I'll get the water supply done up, and then I didn't want to get down to pulling apart their kitchen sink to get this put together, because then they'd have no sinks until I was done, as discussed. And so we're getting down to the end of the day now, finally. So I'm just going to get that done, and then we'll start by tearing into that old sink and trying to make this new one work tomorrow, I think is the plan. Meanwhile, these areas you know, behind the fridge and stuff. I got those escutcheons on there around the gas, and things are looking, you know, pretty nice from the ground up. Sort of, that's our goal here. I am going to put paste wax on this temporary plywood top, and I'm also going to put paste wax on the forever edge of the opening that we cut in here, and probably back there too. And it wouldn't hurt if I'm doing it right around these and right around those too, so I'll do that quick. And that just kind of seals and repels moisture from the edges of that plywood. If you have a leak, it doesn't have to just make it so obvious that there ever was one. A lot of times you fix everything up, it dry it, but if it ever leaks, does like a witness or it ruins the plywood. So I'll do a little something for them there. And then we can get our stone top ordered. And we're going to go with, well, I'll hold off to show you that. Let's get some of these things, plumbing connections done for tonight, and then we'll bug out of here. How you doing? You doing jumping? Yeah. Do it. Yeah. Yeah. Jumping. I like jumping. Yeah. All right, we got this in a couple of weeks ago, and everything was drilled on this center, which if you get up here and look is the actual center, despite the parallax. And so I have a variety of external hoods, louvers, plastic. This has a little spring-loaded flap and stuff. It's aluminum, but the biggest thing here is that I needed something that would land, and it barely does. Certainly the holes do. It is about the exact same width as this block. So, you know, when installed, it should look pretty good. Everything else is quite a bit wider. In fact, the holes didn't even land on this block. And then I had been thinking, well, no, in no case could you use that then. And I'm even thinking now that if I'm just anchoring with self-tapping screws into this plastic, which I guess they give you like, it's 100 thou, you know, or even it's maybe over 100 thou, maybe it's 1/8 of an inch thick. They give you a good amount of meat there, so I guess it'll work if I'm careful. I'll just be real careful with the self-tapping screw not to strip it when I run it in. If I just screw it the one time, we should be fine. So I'm going to come back with the hole saw that I've got right here, set up with an extra long center bit. So as I go into that one that's up there, it'll keep me on that correct trajectory so I can cut with it through the Tyvek and the plywood, but I'll also go straight into the drywall with it and right through the drywall before I even start cutting the plywood. And then once I'm through the plywood, I'm not going to proceed to cut through the drywall. I'm going to from outside, I'll go around inside. I'll have that center hole in the drywall wall from this extra long bit, right? And then I can keep that bit in and come right back out with it. You can put a shorter one in. But the whole point here is being aware from beginning to end that I want to maintain the same center and be coaxial with this hole through all of the layers to the best of my ability. So, you know, otherwise, if you lose that center, especially with hole sawing, you're in a real bad way, and you got to go to a lot of extra lengths to kind of get back on track. It's hard to work without a center hole, and it's easy enough to just think ahead. So that's what we're doing here. Tim's getting fiber internet. I don't know if this is part of it, if that's the leaf sucking truck. Not sure what's going on here, but that hole went smoothly, and now the foam had been drilled, if you remember, weeks ago, and everything ended up, you know, thereby everything. I just went through the plywood and then came right back out. I didn't cut the foam. Here's the proof, right? But I'm very concentric, and I've got to pilot into the drywall. So let's go around inside and make it happen the other way. Okay, that worked out really nicely. And so we've got a nice concentric hole. I just got to add a little insulation to the right, which had been the plan. However, you want to realize that depending on the direction of flow with any ductwork, you want to overlap in the right direction, right? So we've got the outlet going inside of the next component, which would in turn with these this corrugation, what have you, goes inside the next component. And the way in which it sleeves over is with the flow, whereas in the other direction, you'd be trying to push out of the system around the edges, which of course we screw and we tape, but you can be aware of the fact that that's, as a rule of thumb, you want to be paying attention to flow. So this hood supplies this little collar that has the flappers in here of a check valve. So these open with flow and then sit back down from gravity when you haven't got anything happening with the hood, so that we haven't got breezes from outside pushing in. Obviously the flapper outside is a second, or it's a kind of the primary check valve, and then this is like a secondary. But anyway, to get this assembled correctly, there's this little collar, and he goes inside of a 6-inch piping, but unfortunately sleeving over far enough to screw that together, we move off the center line from here to the hole. We're kind of low by about 1 inch. So to turn and go out that hole really isn't possible to do level. You'd be at a cockeyed angle. So I'd need to extend this up or move this whole thing all the way up, which would mean we'd have to take down the hood itself, take the 2x4 loop on the wall, move it up 1 inch, redo this all here. Or I can make a simple little extension here. So what I'll do to create that is I'll take, because I want that other end of the pipe here, I want that ready for outside. So I'm gonna leave the factory crimped edge alone. I'm gonna take a 2-inch strip off this other end because it's overly long. And then on the 2-inch strip, I'm gonna crimp 1 inch on one end to basically make myself this same feature. And there we'll just add a couple of inches, or really it overlaps 1 inch. So we'll just add 1 inch overall to the overall stack height. Then we'll put our elbow right out the wall at the right elevation. We'll take what we need of the rest of this to get outside, and we'll still end up with probably roughly 1 foot of this unnecessary. So you don't get 1 foot of this. The shortest amount you can get is 2 feet. So it ought to all work out in the end. And we've already established that this is a nice height, and I don't know that it needs to go any higher. We're certainly, I don't know that it's worth tearing everything all down and dealing with it this way. So let me quickly make an extension from this here, and then we'll keep ourselves on. All right, I'm finally able to get here early enough where I got waylaid the last few days getting all of the assembly stuff and then having to go back for assembly stuff. And I can, with confidence, at 12:15, I got to get out of here by 5 because my wife got me tickets to a show for my birthday early this year, and the show is tonight. So I can't get out of here any later than like an hour before I normally do. So it's a race against time. But I'm going to, we've got a few things working in our favor, moving this kitchen over here, the, utilities over. This is a 2-basin sink, and we only need the garbage grinder out of here. The rest of this entire drain conglomeration can just sit here for right now. And we got the surround for the garbage grinder and stuff on time so that I can actually install the real matched Kohler, set to this faucet. So at least, of course, the counters are going to be swapped out and the faucet will have to come and go, but this can stay installed to this sink. So everything can be a final installation here as far as bringing that stuff over. The dishwasher can be disconnected from it, from the garbage grinder. here, and I guess they're going to want to empty that and stuff, but it could probably get rolled over and reinstalled as well. And then I've got the last little bit of the hood over the range to get connected up, which I'm still waffling. I don't think I'm going to move it, but I think I'm going to have to cut that back. I said I was going to leave it long, but it just pushes us off the center line of the top hole in the unit, and you really can't go beyond and come back in such a tight space, anywhere near such a tight space. So I have shortened the elbow by a little bit. You know, I just took 1 inch off of the end of it and sort of corrugated it, but it's just not sitting us back far enough. So anyway, that's something I want to try and deal with here, all on a Friday before I go. But I'm gonna get everything complete underneath this cupboard, as I've said before, and then I'm going to go downstairs and lop off the plumbing drain and water supply to this sink and from this sink, and make those quick changes to the new routes that we constructed here. And I'll go through that when I get down to doing it. But I think the safest bet is to start by making sure that this all goes together, because this is more new construction, and I've got what I think I need. I'm fairly certain I've done enough of these now. But in any case, it's still best practice to just put this all together again before there's nowhere to even pour water down this drain, you know, even on the one side and whatever else. I just want to make sure of this. So let's get this knocked out under here, and then we'll pick this up and see what has to happen in the basement. Well, you know what? I was going to reuse this component because, of course, the escutcheon up here is stainless steel, whatever. It's not going to work for us in the new location. But what's wrong with, this is a 3 or 4 year old install with the garbage grinder. You know, what's wrong with the whole mechanical assembly to hold it on there? Well, the rubber boot is gross, and I mean, at a certain point here, I don't think anybody's going to mind. Another thing I ran into is it was hardwired, and we are actually going to use a vacuum switch that turns, and it's more complicated than it needed to be, really, the way that they did this, but you mount this little box with outlets on it underneath the sink, and you put your vacuum switch in the counter next to the faucet. So of course we've got come on, Chazzy, here it is. We've got a gold one of those that will ultimately replace this, but you can't just get the guts of this. You got to get it with the switch, whatever. So then you just plug into that outlet, and that vacuum switch turns the power on and off in those outlets. So you need a plug wire in the garbage grinder rather than being hardwired. And this cleans it, you know, that means it's not an electrical circuit, it's a vacuum thing. It's like a syringe that you're just poking in the vacuum, or the pressure pushes a mechanical switch in that box and it turns the electricity on or off. That's the way they do it now. That makes the switch, you know, there are pros and cons. Now you're going to put a hole in a stone countertop for the switch for the garbage grinder, where, you know, in the 90s, early 2000s and whatever, it was more common, you know, instead of being another hole here, this was the switch for the garbage grinder, which I capped the power line for right now. But that's not really ground fault protected. I don't know if these outlets even are either. So anyway, with the vacuum, you're getting away from electricity with water, and so that's what we're going to do. So I got to go out and get a plug-end wire to put on this. And so I may as well get the mechanical assembly to attach it to this nice shiny new basket, and just everything kind of nice and new here. They're reusing their garbage grinder. That's a significant cost that they're not, there's no point in doing something more extravagant right now. But I think that the assembly, even if from my perspective, I don't really want to be touching and dealing with all that gross bacteria. And so, I've got a newborn son at home, so and I'm also hungry. We're going to get lunch. We're going to get an install kit for this. We're going to get a plug end for that. And then, it may not be a bad idea to take a pass downstairs and make sure I've got everything I need to connect us, but I'm fairly certain that I do. The one thing I'll need is solder for those solder-on valves that go to PEX, so I can connect to the old water and connect the new water lines to it. So do we have... Yeah. We've got solder and we've got flux. So a bite to eat and a couple things and then come back. Okay, this is where things get really annoying, because I thought, Tim even said to me, that's a huge hole saw when I pulled this one out of this kit, the biggest one that I have in the kit, and carved those openings in that cabinet. And my first thought was, no, they are larger. I have larger, but for whatever reason, I was stuck on the fact that it was the biggest one in the kit. The bigger ones are here, Jez. And there you end up with probably, there you end up with your biggest tooth one. Will that accommodate the 3 points of this? Of course it will. Of course it will. So now, I've got to pop that back up, which isn't the end of the world, but I gotta muscle this insanely heavy sink off of this cupboard and then drill that hole this big without a center. So I'm going to need something else, a scab of plywood stuck down to drill a center hole in and hold this hole saw well enough to go through then that piece of scab plywood and then back through this cupboard. So then the hole is big enough, and then pick the sink back up and put the drain basket back in there to this point, and then I can continue to do the project that I came to do today. Isn't that fun? Well, never let it be said that we don't keep it real on this channel. I've never had a problem with startup before, and it was going to be a fun challenge. I was supposed to be out of here at 5. It's currently 6:15. We have a water problem. First, I thought when we turned the water back on that this was just open. Okay, not too shabby. We were able to get this to work, and everything seems pretty hunky-dory down here, looking fairly professional and well consolidated and apparently very functional, and that is awesome. However, if I'm completely honest, we ended up with a problem over here, which is why I haven't got a lot of great footage from startup. And in fact, because I neglected to connect this dongle dink hose end in my haste to just get the faucet assembled and the water supplies connected, and I saw that there was the weight, which is what's going to return this thing, which is another issue entirely now that we have to address. The other end of it was a quick connect, and I figured, well, if it's not quick connected, it's quick unconnected, but not open to flow, which in the end, long story short here, it was open to flow. So as soon as I turned on the shutoff valves back here, everything was awesome. As soon as I opened the mix valve, we had water spraying all down in this region. So then it wasn't a quick fix, because with the drain all connected through the sink base cabinet to the garbage grinder and all the plumbing below, it can't be slid straight out anymore. And because the countertop sandwiches the stretcher of the sink base cabinet, and the sink faucet nut and everything has got that all sandwiched and pinched down tightly, you can't just take this up as if there were no stretcher there and this faucet were just connected to the countertop. Well, then that would just lift up, and these wires and hoses would just be kind of, you could get your hands in there and you could address it. Not the case. So Tim, after I had to leave because it was way too late for me to even go out with my wife to see David Cross on tour, which she bought me tickets for like 6 months ago or 8 months ago for my birthday. And we didn't end up getting to go to the show. I hung out here so late to try and make it so that this kitchen would work for the weekend, because as soon as I had tried to connect anything, I had disconnected everything over here. And we've always known that that would be the case here. I mean, as soon as you take away the garbage grinder, I haven't got what I need to rebuild that drain. So, you'd have to use just the other basin, but the water supply had to be chopped, right? I think I got some footage of that, to get connected to the new faucet. And the old drain, even if you were to connect it to the sink or just use the one or the other side of the sink basin, this had to be all hacked off so we could plumb in the new drain, right? And here's the water supply scenario here. I had to chop those off going up to get on to the new water supply for the new sink. So, I had planned to solder some really nice valves on and then connect to PEX, so that right at those connections there was a shut off for just the kitchen specifically to be isolated in general, which is always a nice thing to have, but we couldn't stop the water from piddling out. And I had hung the pail on the fitting end on this one. Maybe in the video you can kind of see that, to kind of pull this at an angle so the water would continue to piddle out for a while, kind of on autopilot. And I had known that you get enough weight, it'll compromise that copper, but I had wandered away and forgotten, and it did end up kinking it off right there at that reducer T, and so now we've got like a ripple in the copper there, which isn't ideal, and it's not professional. So full disclosure, kind of pissed off when I left here at the end of last week, really mad with myself, that's what I'm talking about, really annoyed, and ultimately had to have Tim, who was very happy to just, it wasn't a big deal. He connected the faucet, and and we hacked this off, right? So the route that goes to the pot filler, I just cut out and threw a quick connect cap on, which is always a nice thing to have in your kit. So I've got those for just such an occasion. Never know when you want to disconnect a radiator, and you need some 3/4 inch push to connect caps or any kind of potable water line, for the most part being 1/2 inch. It'll work on copper and PEX. So those are always a great idea to have, laying around, because they're reusable, especially when you don't plan to leave it in forever, which we don't right there. That'll have to be rebuilt. So what was the problem? Well, first, when we turned the water on, I had laughed when we were up here a day or two beforehand and said, let's not forget to put the pot filler fixture on the wall, because of course there's no shut off or isolation like a typical sink has, those valves there. There's nothing like that for something like this, which, in the end, they're debating. And I hear some people in the comment section, or at least while you're watching, going, well then, that's one of the major problems with them. There's also no drain over here. So whoop-de-doo, you run a bunch of water into a pot over here, says you trip to the sink. You're still going to pour the pasta water or whatever else, for the most part, back down the sink. Well, yeah, but there's a bunch of things that you add water to, especially, if you're stir-frying or various things that you don't take the water, and get rid of it, or you're making a sauce or whatever else. So they also are a nice way, relatively inexpensively, given the cost of this entire kitchen. It's a really nice thing that's a functional production value addition. The matching sort of pot filler with the faucet and some of the other hardware that we've got going on around here, it's going to make this whole place, it's going to elevate it. And it can just hang out, and when you want to use it, you can use it. But in general, it's a nice little piece of bling, I guess. So anyway, back to the conversation at hand. No shutoff valve, so this is just an open stub out. And we worked out that when I was talking before about making a little disc to offset for the thickness of the tile planned, so I could anchor the piece to the wall, I ended up having a duh moment of it can just be threaded on with some Teflon tape, kind of level, snug enough to hold the fort until we come back and tile the backsplash, and then we'll just tile into that area and just make the investment of time and energy in anchoring that pot filler to the tile at once instead of twice, because there's no real reason to represent that and utilize that little, I forget where it is, the little flange thing that really secures the angle of the base of the thing, because the drop ear is one thing, but that little feature is supposed to physically sort of get the thing dialed. So long story short, all we needed to do was thread the pot filler on there. And initially, Tim turned the water on, and I could hear it, and I went, "Doi, hang on, turn it off." And I threaded the pot filler on. And I thought we had headed that off. It was going to be funny that the water came spraying out of here if I spin the pot filler on. So then I go, go ahead, kick the water on. And I'm still hearing the water run, so I'm wondering if it's a toilet hissing, and he's hearing it. And finally hears it splattering downstairs. Now, this is the play-by-play, because I didn't get any footage, I don't think. Maybe I did get a small piece here now that I'm thinking. Maybe it gets cut in prior to this video or this segment. But you can see the water on the floor here. I had water pouring out underneath the drywall because, of course, it's coming out of this PEX somehow, and it's behind the vapor barrier. So that's protecting the drywall, but it's getting on this. It's soaking the rock wool all up, and you can kind of see, actually, yeah, you can kind of see it here. There's rock wool moisture sticking it on there. There's moisture sticking it on here. And I think Tim said that he had moisture all the way up. That's the one unfortunate thing. So I told him, over the weekend, if you want to get this cut open, and it looks like he taped this back, really good call, and we'll get that dried out, because I've got to take that PEX away. Certainly now that I've cut it short and capped the other end of it, it needs to be rebuilt. So, I said check and make sure that I crimped the band, the clamp that holds it on, the fixture, which it seems like it is. So sometimes that's a silly mistake, but I don't think I made it. And then I thought, drilling past for the electrical wires, did the extension rub against the PEX, spin against the PEX, and it did, and make a little abrasion. I've had that happen before. And did that burst? Well, remains to be seen. So I did cut the other end of it, and I'll be cutting this end of it, or I'll probably decombobulate that drop here, unscrew it from the wood, just to make sure I can't pull it upwards, because sometimes there's enough control, despite that this is wiggly, that axially I can't actually slide it down, but otherwise, maybe that clamp isn't clamped, but no, it certainly, then the clamp ring would move, unless it's a bad crimp or an incomplete crimp. So I probably will lift this all up, unscrew the drop ear, and leave it on the PEX insofar as it's on there, and try to disconnect everything here and in the basement and bring everything out this way. And then, I don't know, put my mouth on the other end of it, or otherwise, blow and try to see where I'll have to plug this threaded in, try to see if we can figure out where the leak actually was. and it's going to be in this first 4 or 5 feet. But I've never had a problem like that before. Certainly not one that I couldn't go, oh, well, there's your problem right there. And I just don't think there's enough of a notch there for that to be where it was leaking. Although there is water. It's hard to say whether it was pooling or coming out of this bay exclusively and then flowed over here, or if it was spraying here and it went through the hole and then down here and came out down here, and that's where that pool came from. You know, the only way that water could actually be in this neighboring cavity and then coming down is if it's going through the hole in the stud right here. So, you know, without going down, what do you call him? Not Inspector Gadget. The other one, Dr. Sherlock Holmes. Without being Sherlock Holmes, you know, I'm not sure what is going to actually come of this. But it kind of does behoove me to be like that. It was a real setback in some ways that we couldn't just set everything up, turn everything on, and go, which is unfortunately, or whatever, that's always my experience, is I'm just diligent, and then everything just works. And that over there is a exception to the rule. So I'm going to roll up my sleeves here and try to figure out what happened so that we can close it back up again, put the drywall piece that Tim took out, like I asked him to take out carefully, we'll put it right back in place, and then, you know, we'll close everything back up and do a little mudding. But, you know, we can get the old oven in there and hooked up to the gas and more functional, get his refrigerator over here so they can work more exclusively in this area, because this whole thing's got to get torn down. And it was supposed to already have started, and I'm still talking about this and not fixing it. So let's get started fixing. Well, there's your problem right there. See that? Look at how you can see through. I don't know how to best illustrate it, but essentially, yeah. See the band stands off? We didn't get the band back together here. We got a semi-circ. We got a bad pinch. That right there should have probably been done out in the air and then applied to the wall, but for whatever reason I may have tried to reach in while this was already mounted and crimp that out of laziness. I won't do that again, but that's your problem. And so I couldn't believe that if it were anywhere here that the water wasn't making its way out. But again, seeing the height to which the insulation is kind of slightly glued with a little bit of moisture, it's like it's not going to be as low as I thought, which was right here. Where's a better look at that? Well, there it is there. Not sure if you can see that. But that's the little bit of rubbing that the extension did on its way by. There's also a little bit of very light laceration, which you got to be careful of that. I said to Tim, you know, if it's right at the floor, right down there, it may be because the hole through the sole plate and through the subfloor nearby the rim joist, maybe sometimes I've seen a fastener, a nail, or a screw cut off by the hole drilling that's sharp in the opening. And if you wouldn't reach your finger in there and check to see that you have a problem like that, but you don't want to cut yourself. So sometimes I kind of half-heartedly check or whatever, or assume. You never want to assume things. But in pulling it through an opening like that, you can have a laceration in PEX that, you know, if you don't catch it, or even if you do catch it, you're going to pull that piece back out at that point and replumb that route. So a bad crimp, which is a real bastard. I still don't think it wasn't worth cutting and capping instead of cutting this open and making sure to diagnose this before I left, because I just had to get out of here. And again, I didn't make it to what I was trying to make it to anyway. But even if I had found that, you can't really, you know, like if I hadn't cut it loose down there and if I hadn't pulled this all out before I established that this was the problem, which I had already established before I did all this removal. I took the screws out and I pulled this out and I looked at it and I saw that this is the problem. So, you know, could you have put it back or dremeled this band off and, you know, pulled that out and put a new crimp ring on there. And not really. The plastic's been deformed for long enough here that you need to cut an inch or more off of this. Well, geez, if you cut 3/4 of an inch off, you might be able to get away with it. But I can't get 3/4 of an inch in length up from the basement anyway. Just a whole, you know, it's too late now. So a little bit of PEX ain't no thing. I've got to get it, in any case, I've got to get it off of this fitting. So I've got to cut that band. I might even be able to cut it with diagonal since it's sticking out like that. Pliers. And replumb it with blue PEX from here all the way downstairs. Pull it through those hold downs. I got to cut the crimp ring and the rest of the PEX off of the old PEX T, or the PEX T that was installed for that. Get on the end of that, crimp it, and then chase it all back up so that I'm sure of my overall length. Come back up through the hole here and back up, you know, whatever, behind the electricity to this elevation. Cut it, then do a good crimp to this drop ear component again. Put it back up in here and screw it in and tape to it again, which I wanted it to be sealed, just so that any moisture that leaks past that vapor barrier isn't behind the vapor barrier and then left and causing mold. So, and then I can put some insulation back in there. In fact, if it dried laying here, then that's okay. If it's dry, I can put it back in. I didn't want it to go in there or be wet. It's pretty much dry. That's another benefit of the forced air hose. And then I can put the plywood or the drywall back, and then we'll be back up and running. So let me see if I can't get that much done here in the next hour. right, moment of truth. Zoop. Whoop. Whoop. Wow. Amazing. All right. Now we're back on track. I've been here, I don't know, an hour, less. Tim did get that opened up for me like I asked him to, which I figured would save me a lot of time. And we're fully rebuilt and no issues anymore. I'll never crimp anything in place like that again. Or, yeah, I don't know what I was thinking. I can't even remember if I did or not. Maybe there's footage, maybe there ain't. Anyway, again, we're back on track. Let me pack that up with insulation again, put the drywall back up, I should probably tape it today, and then it can dry well. We move the stove back in here, and they're yada yada using it, and that's best case scenario. The taping will have to dry, and I don't want to hold up this stove install. It'll probably come out a little bit for some reason or another. Oh, that's right. It's the stove from their old kitchen that they're going to be using. However, they've got a newer stove in the shed that's going to ultimately go there. So yeah, so let's get the drywall up and tape that, and then we'll move the old stove in for them to use. And then when the time comes to do El Switcherooski, we can put another coat of mud on and right away put the new stove in. And then at some point, we're also going to tile. And so not really that big of a deal, although super annoying. And I'm going to try to avoid getting drywall mud onto that thing. But anyway, let's get that much done, and then we can call ourselves fully back on track. Woohoo! Okay, so I just put a dab of wood glue into the hot mud so that I could tape with confidence. And I didn't bother taping to the right-hand side of the gas thing. Although, I could put a tiny bit of mud into that screw hole just because it's right here. And yeah, do what I can. I didn't want to let it set up and then try to carve it out to accommodate the escutcheon for that thing, so I just shoved that in there. It actually rides along the inside of the box, so in fact, I was thinking it went on the outside of the box for some reason, like the way that it locks together. So I was concerned that I needed to be able to have clearance, when in fact I don't. But now it's all on there, and really I'm just going to leave it alone. So a younger me would have pulled it back off and then dialed that up and back and forth, yada yada. It's going to be behind the stove. It's debatable whether or not you needed to address all this necessarily, but really I like for it to be sealed once again, and I'll prime it once again above the countertop for the tiling. And of course we won't go down there with tile, most likely. So, ideally this will be all primed and sealed up at least again. So you've got a homogenized, primed, essentially sealed surface in the event that something should occur and it's not immediately soaking in moisture or any other situation like that. If you had a mold problem or anything else like that, or if you had something splat and then slide down, you could pull the stove out and clean it, and you wouldn't be, stuck with gross food stuff, that's bonded to the wall. So, that's, I guess, the ragged edge of my rationale there. But I think that, it was sealed, taped, and primed before, and it certainly wasn't anybody else's fault but mine that we had to undo that. So we'll redo it, and now I feel a lot better about it. And so now, I got to get back to that issue with the hood. I think I don't know what I'm going to do with this. I was about to say I'm going to cut that duct back flush with the wall, but I'm just going to have a hell of a time then. I'm going to have to do that to get back on the center line of that unit, and then to get it taped and screwed together, it will just be kind of a bear, but I'm probably going to have to go into the wall to get that done. Nothing's going to be seen here, so of course that drywall could be cut back 2 or 3 inches all the way around. I haven't got a hole saw to do it, but maybe I could use the drywall router and just set the depth and just follow that duct while it sticks out and just cut a nice big opening so then it can be attached. And, and honestly, if I did that, I'd have like a drywall donut, and I could put it back when I was all done. And for that matter, it could be cut rectangularly so it could be screwed back onto studs. but I'm gonna have to think about it. We'll see what we do. Well, I ended up having to take this drywall out because the designer for this piece of equipment was so excited by the fact that if he put the outlet at this plane, it would just be one elbow necessary, one exact elbow, 1 6-inch ordinary elbow to get into the plane of the wall, except all the taping and screwing that you're going to need to do to the next component is going to exist behind that plane, and you got to get there. And if you were to put this together and somehow push it outside and connect everything and then go outside and have to finish, you just wouldn't have it screwed and taped on the other end of this. And you really want to get the humid cooking air out of the house, and you don't want to push it into the wall cavity. So long story short, again, had to have a piece out of here. I'll have to slice this piece now because it'll have to fit above and below. We can't thread it on over this. I suppose I could have laid here until I was done and then like rolled up into position, but it's too late for that. And so we got to do a bunch of mudding here anyway if we're going to do anything. So I'll just put it up in 2 pieces. Look at that. Man, what an upgrade. Tim's got one of his upper cabinets on here already, and he's used a French cleat on the wall, which is awesome. It's nice and secure, which is to say, he ripped a piece of 3/4 material with a 45, applied the one half to the wall and the other half to the cabinet, and then it sits back together as it was cut. It's, you can tap it left, right. He got it dialed, and we've got a real shallow little skirt area here, and we're right in the center line of that with the little wiring scenario for the under cabinet lights. And that elevation was established based on being sure to cover all of these rough openings that we've got for those little leads there. And so for the most part, I've got a real good feel of the space now, and especially with the plastic down as well. I'm glad to get that out of here. I've been holding off and kind of concerned about doing the finish work on this ceiling over top of stuff, but we can just throw a big drop cloth over this island as we wait to get to a point where they lock it down. It's a little mobile right now, and so, the cavity on this side has got, 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces to sit and eat, and the counter will come out a little bit beyond here. And then those are just a cabinet door, no drawer, so that you can put extremely seasonal type stuff in there. Some of the, I don't know if you're into the food processor all the time or some of those other things that they've got tucked in there, maybe makes more sense in those areas. But you never know. You could put board games in there or whatever else. Dining room table here, living room set up here. So, looks like we got to get rid of this kitchen island. And I think that's what we're going to start with today. I had the electricity tester in there, make sure we went down and turned a bunch of breakers off. I'll double check all this stuff. But I think that my angle of attack is going to be to take the trim off of this wall, the drywall off the outside of it, and then break down and fold up the framing and take it away, moving it off so that I can get to the, there's a heavy amount of silicone underneath this thing. And so, as far as it being like sealed to the edge there too, I just as soon walk away with that tile, not make a bunch of pieces of tile and grout. And we don't want to destroy these cupboards because honestly, with the stone top and the cabinet bases, the sink, the faucet, all of this is all very usable kind of a thing. And honestly, if I don't destroy the knee wall, it might be, a halfway decent thing to get it out of there in one piece as well, or not one piece, but several major pieces that aren't just trashed. You never know what someone might be able to make use of. There's nothing really all that, well, I can't say that. The tile job was good, but it's a bit dated now. So maybe the drywall that it was applied to could be taken down and then a different backsplash tiled onto it. And, you know, the trim may be a little bit different. Maybe shouldn't have been an OG on 3/4. And, you know, normally we put a profile on the bottom corner of a top cap, not the top. So that's interesting. But anyway, nonetheless, we've got to take it apart so we can get a more clear view of what we're actually dealing with here. And I expect these two lights will turn into cans. I expect, or whatever, these are recessed, you know, but I expect they'll all also be upgraded to LED, along with what we do in the ceiling in the kitchen and what we do right here. Unless that's going to be a fan. I think that's going to be a fan. Anyway, it just feels great to be finally looking in real life at what we've been looking at on the computer for so long. And, you know, there are some, we got to get the wiring into the island so we can put the microwave in and have it have it functional. And of course we want to get a little like rise up outlet out of the middle of the stone top. And so I think we're going to end up needing to locate that in a cabinet box for rough-in purposes. And, you know, that may mean, I don't know, see, because your drawer goes to the back of this space. And you don't want to pull a drawer out and have a notch the way you have a notch in a vanity around the drain in a bathroom. So we'll see if moving from to the actual center line of the full width pulls us out of those cupboards with drawers so that our rough-in little box is in the top of one of these seasonal cabinets for the electrical. Or maybe that'll mean that while we're on the center line end to end, we'll just move this way enough for that to be the case. Although it may be kind of odd, again, if it's not in the center. So we've got some things that we're going to discover by mocking them up as we work. But again, I'll set up a camera angle here and let's get this island out of the way. Well, when I encountered this situation on this side, I wondered how likely it would be on the other side. And it turns out very likely. I have no idea. Well, there's some real mysteries in this thing, but I think what happened here is that someone built the three sides to this island as the blueprint called out, and they thought that this was going to get them to the corner, and they did it twice. And this is where it can kind of do some, you know, try to deduce what occurred. But they did it again here, where this looks like longer. Yeah, this wing is longer, that's shorter, but they made the mistake twice somehow. And then they had it all built with this angled end and a square end. And of course, this thing's supposed to have a square end. So if the angled end was supposed to be there and they didn't want to waste their work, they have to make this angled, like short frame to jump over and get this thing to be long enough, make the same thing happen over here to jump everything over and make it long enough. But the killer here is, you know, and if you're with me here already before I explain this, then, you know, points. But the killer in my mind is that they had to, not only did they have to do twice as much work, they did the wrong thing that many more times. Because if you've got to take a given wall thickness like this and go around a corner with it, and it's got to maintain its width the whole way, you can't put a square end on one of the components, because just doing it here like this, you can see that to put the correct angle on the other one, you're going to have this little titty thing, and it's a second cut that you have to make to cut him off, all right? But then you really need to have, for this sheet of drywall and this sheet of drywall that are coming down the pike, again, and this, whatever you're covering the wall with, here, boards, whatever, for that to have something to anchor to, anchor to, anchor to, and anchor to, you need to have some meat at all four of these kind of points here. And so you just continue to create problems for yourself, because if this is the piece that you made to do that, and then you want to put a 2x4 in at the edge of it, then it's not tight over here and it's tight here, but that isn't where the corner is. And then this is where you need some meat. So you got to make some weird, it just spirals out of control. What you do is you take this whole thing and you go from the outside corner to the inside corner, and that is you bisect the entire thing. This angle is then equal to this angle. This angle is equal to this angle, see? And you put an angle on the ends of both, and that way, when it comes together, you haven't got anything overly long, and you can add a stick here and a stick there next to one another. Now, because this is a 2x4, and this point-to-point distance here is greater than a 2x4, you have to go to a 2x6, and you have to rip this angle on the edges of it to make the stick that goes in the corner here. You have to do that here too, but it's just something if you do a lot of framing, you need some 2x6s around to do these inside corners when you have angles and stuff like this. So that's what you do here, and it gives you meat at all 4 points for the cladding material. And then at whatever point, you can start with 2x4s, and you can do your stud layout, because this corner geometry is attached to the fact that there's a bend or a corner here. It's independent of the stud layout. So we just start at one end, you go 16 inches on center, wherever they fall here as you go around the corner, you pivot here, and you just measure around that corner to the next location, and you keep going. That way the two pieces of drywall and everything's just kind of copacetic. And it all starts with understanding that this is what you do in a case like this, which somebody didn't understand. And they didn't understand it so hard that when they made a dimensional mistake, they had to do the same very complicated and irritating work and smash it all together with big hand-driven spikes, and then clad this whole thing with hardwood, and they had to glue it all down. They had stuff chunking out, and I can see now that they made that error for whatever reason. Couldn't read the blueprint maybe, and again, the electrification is also pretty shoddy. And so now that we're sure all these circuits are off, I'm just going to clip everybody right at the box. I can take then the old work box will go right out through its hole in the drywall. The drywall and tiling and stuff can go away. The wiring can go straight downstairs, and then the framing can come away. And I was thinking before it might be worth keeping these components to go along with this cabinetry and this countertop, but honestly there's so little here that's usable, and it's kind of compromised here. When we let go of the floor, it's going to be all floppy. The thing to do is to reframe this someday. If somebody wants to get and use this stuff, they can do their own thing. Maybe the wall won't even be a short wall. But anyway, I wanted to show that I can see what happened here. And I'm not going to lie and say I've never made this mistake, but I think I made it like one time way back in the day, and then I found out what you're supposed to do. So by the way, that's what you're supposed to do. So I think Tim said it best just now when he said it's like my first construction project, because I mean all these little weird triangle shapes and oblong shapes and double layers and having to add a layer to begin with, and all this other pieces and all these parts and stuff, it just kept running into, oh, well, I need this to be up here, I need this to be over there, I need something to screw to here, I need something to attach to there, but, it's all together too long, so we're just stapling, brad nails, and basically, nothing is very secure, and we get all done making something and trimming it in, but you find, like, for example, the middle sink base, there was no box. There's this ultra cheap press board, half-inch wall, stamped steel drawer slide box, and there's the small one over here, and then they just scabbed together between the two, and came off of that wall over here on the end of the dishwasher with a loose piece of 1/2 inch, shimmed up to catch the stone top with a 3/4 face frame. And it's, essentially what happens is the sum of the things like this, the sum of their parts, it's all just a rickety, unsquare, difficult to work with thing. And no one understood at all the way that you would go about making it so that your life's easy, from framing it to building, installing cabinetry to the framing, to running systems throughout it, to cladding it and trimming it. They had just an irritating time pulling their hair out and being frustrated because they didn't know what they were doing at all. And I can't believe in a house that's 20 years old, or a couple more years old, 22, 23 years old, whoever did this was clearly way out of their depth. And it's too bad, this house is worth a better part of, it's valued over $500,000. And this is the build quality. And this is where, as a construction professional and a designer, I just struggle with real estate and the value assigned to some of these places. Now, I'm not running down this house. It's well worth, at this point, what somebody, what Zillow thinks it's worth. But it's too bad that the reality is that would be the same situation, would be the same given the location, the square footage, the finishes, the overall layout, etc., if the build quality was even just status quo. And so this is where you want to be careful when you're a new home buyer, because you want to open cupboards up, poke your head in, see what things are made of, and then sometimes you can start at least making a better decision. And it used to be you could kind of haggle a little bit, but I just, when I've helped friends buy a house, I've been careful to look at stuff like this, because I know that this type of stuff is easily hidden from the average person. But I could smell this problem all over this thing from the beginning, although I'm still kind of surprised at how blatantly obvious it is that someone didn't know what they were doing here. So now that I'm done kind of giving it the business, let's finish cleaning it up and getting it out of here. We got a young Rick Rubin here. Well, unfortunately, it was not really that conventional, even at this point in the early 2000s, to finish the floor and then place your island, especially if you're going to drill holes to the floor. There's something to be said for the fact that they would still be there. But a lot of times now, and I've even discussed it here, although I think we might skip that here too, because it's going to help us see there are pros and cons. But a lot of times nowadays, you can expect to make changes, and under some circumstances, you would just finish the floor, place the island, and then small changes to it can be made. It could be updated, it could be replaced, and you haven't got to disturb what would constitute, in this case, real 3/4 hardwood oak flooring, especially if this was a new build and that was the planned kitchen, and this whole area was going to be hardwood floor, like right to start with. I would say just do the whole thing and place the island, and then you can make all kinds of changes down the road, or none, and you've got kind of, everything's safe. The amount of money in the material in the space of an island, in the scheme of things, and the time spent slamming it together, frankly, accounting for, especially an island like this at an angle, and putting all those pieces in and, fitting it to there, when you can just slam 12, 16-foot sticks in all the way across the room so much more quickly in the scheme of things, in the shuffle, when you're throwing an entire house together and finishing it, really, you're better off just finish the whole floor, place the island loose, or, on top of that, and afford yourself that flexibility. So long story short, obviously, we haven't got that happening here, but we used to have carpet all in this area here, and this is going to get reshuffled around and go back to being 2 1/4 oak. But I think that they want more of a blonde color, making the cabinetry darker. It's either going to be, along the same lines, or the cabinet's a bit darker, and the floor hopefully more like the unfinished maple here. So we've got a lighter wood floor, the darker like golden tone but matte or satin finish of the cabinet, unlike the high gloss here from the 90s, and then a white ceiling done with micro bevel or something on the shiplap, so that we've got some longitudinal lines happening, but complementary to this white smooth ceiling. So at this point, I've got to finish demolishing the rest of the old kitchen. And I think my goals today are to get the lower cabinets out of here, get the stone top to the garage when Tim gets back, and we're going to probably just take the backsplash out, that drywall, like precisely take it away with the tile on it, and simply put that back in new drywall with tape and mud that. Because I think for the most part, they're going to end up with an entertainment center kind of built in, or at least a credenza with a big TV on the wall. And in a lot of ways, we're going to do a nice job with the drywall finishing, but I don't think there's any reason to think that it couldn't be done that way. And I expect, the one thing that would change it is if it's, if for whatever reason they glued these cabinets, or otherwise, we don't get them down. In fact, I have to be careful about the edges here where it was caulked, so that we don't just start the tape a-tearing over here as well. And here we haven't caulked, so we just want to be aware of that, or you're going to have yourself a real surface, a skim coat project. And at a certain point, I'd rather just put new sheets up. So we're going to try to avoid that syndrome, but I guess to start with, we got to get the boxes out of here. Well, I don't know why I bother to explain my intentions sometimes, because frankly, most of the time I turn around and do something entirely different, or becomes, untenable, and I have to do something completely different. So the plans changed, took the tops down first, because you get to this point here and this stone can't be pivoted up because it's underneath the lip of the backsplash, which was applied later. So we can't tip up like this. And we obviously wouldn't try to tip up like that, even though we're also underneath the edge of the backsplash over there. And trying to pivot out is a shear operation, trying to shear off the sticky silicone, and that's where it's going to be strongest. Getting it to tear when we lift or pivot is a different kind of application of force. Again, trying to slide it laterally like that and make a movement like that, it's never going to come out of there, and you're going to smash, trying to get the edge of the corner of it. I thought for 1 second about trying to get underneath this and try that, as well as lifting out here. And, I don't know how much reusability there is in this kitchen. These boxes are pretty shoddy. The face frame is solid oak, but it's been painted with enamel now. And so anyway, the counter is matched to the box, and I just didn't want to break the stone. And that's the thing about it. If anything's valuable about this kitchen secondhand, it's the stone. But then you kind of need to have boxes that fit, or you get into like squaring this off and making, I don't know, I suppose you could do this and then square it off here, but you'd be missing the corner. This is the full corner here, which is short of the actual end of the box. And so even if you had a piece of equipment like a fridge or something there, this would roll off of that plane right at the very end. It could be okay, I guess, but it's just tough. I've cross-cut or otherwise cut stone tops before with circular saw with a diamond blade, and you need for every foot or two of cutting, you need a brand new diamond blade and flood it with water, so you got to do it outside. So we're just at a weird impasse here with what to do with these kitchen boxes. I think Tim's going to put a bunch of the uppers up in his garage, and the lowers, it remains to be seen. I wanted it to be listed for a few weeks already on Facebook Marketplace. I didn't get to it, and they didn't get to it while we had photographs of it, or people could come and see it, assembled, or, possibly even take it out. I've done that on a couple of occasions where I wanted the kitchen boxes. I came and removed everything, but of course it was better quality than this. I would have started here as I did with the island and immediately established that it wasn't worth the effort of taking this apart to try and take it somewhere and use it again. So I think that we're kind of saying that it's fairly likely that we're going to just throw most of these cabinets out. The case could be made for just keeping the face frames because it's all solid oak, but that OG, that colonial profile, the fact that it's golden oak, poly, and then painted white, it's really getting to a point where it's a dime a dozen. And it wasn't a great kitchen to start with, right? So that's the point of fixing this thing, is that there wasn't any counter space. So probably end up throwing it out. Okay, so Tim's going to take the trim off that closet because that's going away. We did think long and hard about whether or not, because once you have a closet, it's a lot easier to keep it. Putting it back or making another one somewhere else is kind of involved. So we're sure of that. Meanwhile, I'm trying to decide if I want to make a strip repair where the backsplash was. It's really not ideal to have to come up and over both of those joints, and you're standing on your head, bent at the waist, trying to finish down into this area, when instead that's a little over 50 inches. So anyway, we have a 10-foot sheet of drywall left from the 2-packs that we bought. And if I were to square this down, it's just 8 feet and 8 feet. So I can use the 2 halves of that 10-footer, 2 halves of another 10-footer here. And that's a factory joint to the wall plane, a pair of factory joints in the middle, an inside corner, another pair of factory joints, and then a factory edge on this new piece to the old wall plane. Far easier to finish. And yeah, I'm bending over to finish toward the floor again there, but not in that big of a way because, again, a butt joint, or a flat joint, sorry, not a butt joint, is far easier to hide. And we've obviously got a black mold problem here, so it just gets rid of everything. The electrical changes we're going to make are also going to be handy. And he's even got, interesting, he's got ducts, although that's the garage wall. It's technically the exterior wall of the house. It's not ideal to be missing that insulation, but again, the garage is over there. And he's got a stack over here. I think that's the drain from the master bathroom upstairs. So I just want to be aware of what I'm trying to accomplish here without making more work for ourselves. I have a small repair to make there, and that electricity will probably turn into the TV/entertainment center kind of circuit, because it's actually still on. These circuits are off now. And so there's already a single, breaker and everything right where it kind of almost needs to be there. We'll keep that. But for now, I'm going to finish up the day by getting the rest of this drywall out of here in a couple big pieces. If you notice, I took most of the stuff out of here in big pieces. It's just the best practice. I've said it a million times probably, but, don't make a bunch of trash and debris and rubble like HGTV with sledgehammers. I just got everything traced out. That's where a $50 oscillating saw blade that's carbide teeth. In fact, I almost exclusively run carbide only for Sawzall and oscillating saws, but I ran around that in a minute or less. And same goes for this over here, right through the grout, right through the drywall, just walk right away with it. And I like the semicircular ones because I can kind of rock that whole thing around and kind of come at things from a variety of angles without clocking the blade differently in the saw. The boxes are going to hang out, but man, they're just covered with like cooking grease, and it's just something that, and you know, they're such low quality press board, super thin. It's probably going to be the case that they go into the dump trailer and just go away, because, you know, as much of a cool idea as it would be to even just get them to a new home for free, look at it, it's got the whole works clogged up here. So I don't think we're going to deal with that. I think day after tomorrow is demo day, or is trailer day. Tomorrow is the second demo day, and we got to get, you know, looking at whether or not this another door from the garage can over there open into this front room of the house. So that's kind of our goal now, is for this to stop being the main entryway to the house and become more of a garage door into a utility room to the slop sink, where this door stays closed more often. And instead, the dining room, now that it's migrating over here, you know, this could be more of a mud room, or really, it's got a bad kind of a stigma with mudroom, more of an entryway. You got the front door here, you'd have the other door from the garage there, you'd have a pantry room here, and you could have some built-ins, bench seats, places to hang coats, and tile this whole area here. And so all the infrastructure for coats and book bags and hats and guests and shoes and all that stuff would be kind of consolidated to this area of the house, kind of out of the way of everything. You could come in from the grocery store, go right around into the pantry, and then continue on to the kitchen. Everything would be like tile, and you could put some exterior carpets in here. And again, whether it's front door or back, it's just a more presentable thing. And that's then to head that way, again, pantry and utility laundry to the living room. So more likely this becomes more of the main drag, with the door to the basement shut, but the study here with the glass door, the stairway, a small, you know, the powder room with the door shut, but then more of the official like lane through the house would be on the left-hand side here. You get into the dining, kitchen, living, and what have you over there. So that was where this series started on paper back at episode 1. Now this house, the exterior wall of the garage is over here somewhere. It notches over to there. So I can't throw that door here, unfortunately, and maximize this room. It's got to be over here somewhere. And you know, if you've been watching this series, you know that you can't trust this blueprint. So we've got to look and see how far that goes. Looks like that outlet, just beyond that outlet. So kind of like starting with that first portrait, you know, there's a chance that that door's like here-ish, and frankly, the door slab will probably be right hand opening in and go just past 90 and stop at the pantry wall, because you're going to need enough width of a room here to carry a door. Likely that is a left hand in swinging door to the left hand side, although I suppose it could be a right hand in swinging door this way. But in any case, he's got some built-ins that came out of this place. There was a wall from the column to the outside wall, and Tim had made a kind of a nice built-in there, and we took those cabinets down and put them in the basement. But they may make an excellent, you know, quick and easy build out for a pantry. And again, it's his own work, and it would make it far nicer than buying something cheap and throwing it in there. So we've got more work to do here in this part of the house, and that's where we're coming from with this demo. It's gonna, you know, now that the kitchen's gone, we got to look at how much drywall is going to go away, how much is going to come back, and we're going to get the carpet out of here and stuff like that. So stay tuned. I tell you, man, I've seen a lot of stuff in my day, but the same sheets of drywall, half nailed and half screwed, that is particularly annoying and silly. But you had two guys from two different schools, or you had a guy putting it up with nails to hold it and then finishing with the screws, because you got to get the wired corded screw gun out probably. and was into trying that new tech, but he wasn't trying to hold the screw gun with a cord on his hip while he's holding onto the sheet or something like that. But taking it apart is annoying, that's for sure. Well, it just gets pretty busy in here when everybody gets home from school and from work, so we're missing the ends of some of these days before I get back and sort of recap. So I apologize if there's a continuity sort of jump sometimes. Obviously, I'm always moving forward through time, so that's not confusing. But as far as, again, steps being missed or whatever, I'm doing my best to make logical sense without really putting a lot of time into setting up a camera and or remembering to turn it on or off. It's a lot to juggle because, of course, this has always been coming down the pike. This is just demolition. We're going to take away what we don't need. We're going to put back, what needs to be put back. We're going to mitigate the work that's involved in doing that, and you're just going to take it, again, in the right order. We'll get everything out of here that we know we don't want, but unfortunately, you do have to immediately look forward in time and imagine what that would be and how it would be that you're putting it back together again. So as I explained about the way we'll cross-cut 10-foot pieces here. We'll take advantage of the fact that we'll replace the moldy area there, and we'll mitigate. Of course, these are all flat joints, as I was saying. There will be a butt joint, but it's in essentially the right area. There's almost always one along horizontally in a wall like this because we normally put courses of drywall in horizontally anyway, although it's, of course, more of a flat joint, less of a butt joint, but be that as it may. Totally doable, and again, it's at a height that makes it handy to finish rather than standing on your head, I call it, which is to bend over, low to the floor and try to sand something, or see it actually more. I'm using the pole sander now, so it's not like I have to bend right over, and working above, again, used to be with the ladder, or at least to get up there and look. So there's always something to be said for keeping your work at essentially the middle and right in front of you, right? So without having to move your body up or down off the plane of the floor. So there you go. Back to the actual task at hand. We've got framing to take out here in the by way of this closet. As you may have noticed, however, there was apparently a good reason for this wall to stay. In a lot of people's opinions, I had said, once you've got a closet like fully enclosed, it was drywall inside and out, finished completely, and it had moldings inside and out of a door that was very functional, and it was fully finished outside corners, inside corners. Jeez, man, to start from scratch as if that wasn't there and remake that little bump out to the extent that it was remade here, there's, over a week of work. So it's, there's one day spent framing it, and a day spent hanging drywall on it, and then the next couple of days finishing that drywall, and then the last day and a half or two putting in the door and cutting all the trim and putting it all back around everything and trimming it all out. So, and that's, in a perfect scenario. So that's 40 hours to rebuild this thing, plus the material cost in it. And that's not real, as if you didn't have the material sitting here, you'd have to go get it all. You can end up with more of a 60 or 70 hour project of building somebody a closet from scratch. So you want to think about something like, well, just pull that off. Well, now you're in for a penny, in for a pound. So we've got to do something about the water that was routed out within the structure, staying outside of what is an exterior wall, because it can be chilly, especially when you just have a 2x4 construction. So now the question is, how do we take this away, and where do we move this to? Well, as we take the return off, there's a good chance that there's a 2x6 on the back of it, or a stud vertically in the wall edgeways to return the drywall on either side. And so the one way around it would be a solid wood surface. The other way, there'd be a cavity there. And I guess theoretically then you could move both of these over, not necessarily the copper, but you could route 2 half-inch PEX lines, or even this is 3/4 for some reason. I don't know if they chose hot to have more volume or cold, honestly. But, and we could move those over in packs, right? And you could put them right there. But you're getting right back to the outside wall again. Sure, we could put the styrofoam behind it the way that we did in these other cases over here. But if we don't have to do something like that, maybe let's not do that, right? So what does that mean? And this is where you get clunking in the walls, which may or may not happen in this house, but from the heating and cooling of the running water or water hammer. It should be all foam, and you know, these days, I don't think a mouse chewed that open. He hasn't had any mouse problems, I don't think, in this kitchen. The house is too new. But anyway, should have been fire block foamed and whatnot. So what are we going to do instead? Well, that goes upstairs clearly right into the thickness of this floor, firstly. And since our beam replacement happened through here, that's because our rafters are on a wall that's built on that beam. And on this side, the floor joists and what amount to the ceiling joists down here, the floor joists for upstairs, are lying in here like this. So basically there's a rim, and then somewhere here is that first floor joist. And so maybe this is like right on the side of it, and maybe this is in the cavity. Anyway, you could turn there right in the middle of the thickness of the second floor from upstairs, make a 90, and run along on either side or both on the same side of that joist or the other. Actually, yeah, the inboard joist would be better. Again, staying away from the cold outside. And then turn and go around the corner here, and the stud goes in this direction. You just have a double top plate there. So, you know, it would mean, could you make a small hole or a little access square, basically take a 1 foot square or whatever gets you to that first stud. Yeah, about 1 foot square. Cut it carefully away, open it up, make that corner transition, those holes, get the body of the right hand drill in, drill up, and then you could come down through them. But you'd have to drill a massive hole so you could kind of reach through it with a tool and catch the end of the pecs coming towards you and try to pull it to turn a corner and stuff like that. It could be tricky. So, you know, we really have to think through what our total plan, you know, might be. In fact, if we're going to make a rectangle like that, we may need to make another rectangle so we can get up onto the top plate and work. And you could cut in elbows then. You could cut in and try to crimp in pecs elbows. So then I would use them there too. So you could go, well, solder onto copper elbow, sweat 2 stub barb for pecs, and then take the pecs across, working through the hole in the ceiling, cut in elbows, and working through the hole in the sidewall, get this vertical pecs, or frankly, maybe just a hole in the ceiling is all you need. Because once there's a hole just in the ceiling, you can go up through it and down onto that top plate and drill downward, and then you can easily send the pecs through that opening, and you don't need a hole in the side wall. So you could just make your access a hole in the ceiling right there. And we got to find the joist because you want that piece of drywall to be cut on the center line of it so it could be put back up in there. There's something to return it, and the taping and the mudding of it is pretty smooth and easy. And so maybe when we pull, we pull the double top plate down in this wall, right? We'll see where that joist actually lies. We can plot it over there. We can lay out a little access hole. We can cut it. And we can also, before we do that, see up through that indeed everything would be clear, a clear shot through there. And so then if we do that, then the plumbing can all happen, and you can go down into the basement inside the structure through this plate with some pecs, and then tie back into those downstairs in the basement. The entire time, you know, it would be, well, you could put that off, cutting that. So you could do all of this, and you could build the pecs and just leave it overly long into the basement and a bit long here. And then, honestly, you could go right by the copper and take a pretty good measurement and just snip that pecs once it's all fully installed, and know that when you hold it out of the way, cut the copper right there and sweat the elbow onto it, then the pecs can be deformed enough just to zip right onto the end of the stub out and be crimped there through the hole in the ceiling. So we have to open that hole in the ceiling a little bit greater, but thereby we can mitigate the openings in the drywall, which all in all, we're going to be here doing all the drywall operations anyway. So, and we've got ceiling to blend and repaint and stuff anyway. So it's not a big deal that we're changing the plane that we're working on, or frankly, So anyway, and we'll turn there, we'll go over, we'll turn there, we'll come down, we'll go into the basement. And then the last thing to see is where that puts us. There's these 3 ducts coming in on the beam in the basement. And I'm just walking you through some, start to finish planning that I take for granted. Perhaps it's not all that amazing, but I've done it with people before, and it makes it clear that, right, you're going to want to think that far about it and help yourself out. So there's 1, 2, 3 wall stacks going up. There's this one that's insulated, and then that right there is where we're talking about coming down. Now there is the chimney for if I turn this light on, it's going to be right in our faces, but that's the chimney for this furnace right here. Or maybe it isn't a chimney. No, it goes out. It goes out. Normally that's plastic. There they are. That's the exhaust, yeah. So that's a zone valve on it. It's a vacuum controlled zone valve to something right there. Anyway, we don't want to hit that, but obviously there's air for his compressor here too. Water. Looks like that's where it goes. No, that's gas. That's black pipe. I wish I could turn the lights on, guys. Sorry. But there's some type of water here. I just don't know if it's hot or cold. So anyway, there'll be something to connect into the water over here. And that will all be pushed by the decision to definitely take that closet out. Because to start with, it makes sense to take the millwork off, the trim around the door, and then if the door jamb is exposed, you may as well cut the pre-hung door free, which we took away. And then you could start working from that raw opening to peel the front off, and you start peeling your way around the corner, and then you see, lo and behold, when you're in for a penny and for a pound, that the water lines are here. And so I suppose it could be said that in the future, if I thought for a second that somebody might want to keep something like this, and of all the places, basically what we're doing is, we're removing a little bit of something here, but it's this construction that is actually going away. And if I thought critically about it and thought, the biggest problem that you might have is that there's systems hidden in it, I still wouldn't have likely thought that there were. But it certainly could have had a couple holes drilled or a big hole, so just one big hole saw hole right here, real careful. Lucky you don't go through, hit the copper pipe, and drill a 1/4 inch pilot hole, although you'd feel that if you had the experience. But anyway, and just make a little window, maybe set the pilot super shallow, so you just go through, take that little big diameter circle out, and you have a little gander, and you just make sure. Now, I was careful not to go cutting through or hacking, because if there's electricity routed through here, obviously that's a best practice. You don't just cut right into the walls, the whole thickness. We take the skin off first so we can see what we're looking at. So there was no danger of just sawzalling through it and hitting it and spraying water everywhere, because we don't do it that way. But this is where it'll get you if the utility's in there, and it kind of has to be there without some extra effort. So long story there, but that's where we're at now. And frankly, I'm going to take it all down around that piping. That sole plate was one of the problems, it being through there. But look, there's already a big hole out the side of it, and that's all I'm going to do is just slice those couple of things, and for now just leave the little piece of wood around the copper, just like you leave a branch where the electrical line grows into it, and the tree outside. For now, we'll get all the framing out of here, and then we'll probably take a look through the hole in the ceiling, make a final decision on where to fully open that up to for access, and then come over here and cut that access hole, and then we'll be down to, I think, because we're getting ready to demo out, or we're getting ready to load all the stuff out with the dump trailer tomorrow. I think the next thing will be to go into the garage and find out where the door has to be by drilling through the wall. See, here's all the stuff we got to chuck. We got to go to the corner, come off the corner enough to account for a trim and some white space drywall, and just drill through, and then come around and see where that hole actually is, and pull from that hole over toward us here to see what width. I think this is a 34. To see if we can have a 34 inch door there-ish, leaving enough room for a wall's width, and then a wide enough room to be a pantry at all. And then thereby, can those built-in cabinets in the basement be used in that room, or can we make it big enough to where they can be used? How does that throttle the size of the door from the garage, and how to make all that, play nice if we have to sacrifice something or not, we'll have to see. So 14 minutes of explanation. Now I better start doing something productive, right? Now with that out of the way, I can make an executive decision here on how much ceiling to take away. I might have said this to myself before, but obviously the popcorn is a problem. It was something that was sprayed after they hung just the ceiling and then they did the rest of the drywall, which is an interesting way to go about it. It made it ultra cheap, and so anyway, it was in the closet as well. And rather than trying to scrape that off, skim it, or sand it, or anything like that, I'm thinking that I'll just finish taking that piece out of there. And then I'm going to need to return this drywall because it's just hanging out in space over this big long span here. But with that gone, I'll be able to put a 2x6 piece about this long, whatever, that fits up in there, comes back, it's flush, it's laying flat, so there's enough to screw into, and I can screw into the edge of it from here with some construction screws, and that will give a return for that. And then we get these rerouted, these water lines rerouted by working up here to put the elbows on, get the pecs down there, whatever. I can get in there with the drill, and then I'll just make myself the rectangle, that is required to get all the way to there, all the way to there, all the way to there, and all the way to there. And we'll go around this corner as well after I clean those couple nails out with some board, and then this will amount to a little more finishing for an outside corner than you would normally have if the sheet of drywall made it all the way over here. Although I'm going to have to see about locking that. There is some wood back there, so I can screw that down, which is good. And so we have a, where does it start here? Way over there at the window. Oh, nice, yeah. So we're just going to have a little bit of blending to do below the window. This will be fully hidden behind the window trim. We'll have some blending to do here, and then up here and around the corner and out onto those areas. And then what to do here. Because we went to all this trouble to leave this for the sake of the finished corner. It's at least taped and good enough, probably. It's probably good enough. I mean, somebody apparently did a pretty nice job of finishing it despite the fact, and actually all the finish work in here was good, even though it wasn't as though this was finished and then I don't think the closet was built afterward. So they got into the closet and did a nice job finishing. So we won't have to do much here. So that means, it really just needs a strip here. And if we could keep it as narrow as possible, there's returns on both sides. So we just take like 1/2 inch off and 3/4 of an inch off, because this is already back some from the wood there, see? So anyway, we just plot out the center line of this, center line of that, take it away, and put a 8-foot long strip in there, floor to ceiling. Probably be best there. So I guess we'll get that piece out of the ceiling and make sure this is everything doing the way we think it is. It looks like there's insulation between here and upstairs too. So then once we're sure of everything there, we'll have to go over and make our little access port in the corner. And then we're just going to keep doing demo stuff, collecting debris to load into the trailer. I'm not going to switch to plumbing right now, but we want to be thinking about it while we do these operations, right? Okay, so I think I've decided, since we got about 8 feet to there, if we went another 4 foot and we used a full 8-foot sheet, we could then have a flat joint from the factory edge of it to this plane of the wall, and from the factory edge of it to that plane of the wall. And I wouldn't have to add a strip through there and take a long strip off the side of the sheet anyway, which is what's going to probably have to happen somewhere here, and use the strip rather than the rest of the full sheet. So what am I saying? It means there'd be one seam all the way floor to ceiling over there, one seam over here floor to ceiling, and then another seam here, a corner, and a horizontal here, a flat in the middle, and a flat at the end there. And it makes the most of the sheet of drywall that's necessary just to get the 8-foot rip off of it, and it utilizes that tapered factory edge of the sheet of the drywall more better, I think. Anyway, we got sheets of 8 and we've got sheets of 10 sitting in the garage, so I'm just trying to come up with, again, what to take away here today. And so I think it means to finish that cut plumb to the ceiling, cut across there, although it does forfeit that finished joint at the ceiling. There's something to be said for that. So one way or another here, I'm going to finish deciding how much drywall to take and then finish taking it out of here. Okay, curveball, because Tim had said something about this outlet, which was where the microwave was plugged in, being still hot. And I can see that it's wired with this outlet in series, or appears to be, and obviously that goes downstairs. So I just checked that. Lo and behold, that's hot. So that's its own circuit, because of course this is dead. Don't listen to this. Yeah, it's just very sensitive. These are all dead. That's a low voltage warning, and if you get real wild with it, if you hit it, it goes off. So maybe it's faulty, maybe it's always been like that. So and you can't completely trust this, but we are just dealing with 120 VAC. And so then I'm looking, and I noticed all these wires dropping in from above, and it got me thinking, I hope that I can get to it. I didn't realize, I figured it would be coming from downstairs. So in this wall, it comes in from above. All the power seems to come in from above. In fact, I haven't checked to see if that's hot. I should go around the other side. That's pretty reliably on. So that circuit is different from these circuits. And you're supposed to have two circuits in the kitchen, and they're supposed to be ground fault protected. So there's a GFCI there, and there's a GFCI there, and that should be first in line from the home run. But of course, the wiring to that goes up, and the wiring over there goes up, nothing below. So what I'm saying is, the first step here is to figure out which of these over-counter outlets is on which of the two GFCI outlets. I expect that that's got a home run to it, and thereby that and that are on that circuit. And I expect this has a home run, and this are on that circuit. Over here, and if that's the case, I can tell you that I reached up here, and the wiring going left and right is right about here, so it can be, I can reach up there, grab it, pull it back, or whatever. And I'm still trying to work out what to take for drywall here, but then the electrical aspect became a component to that decision making, right? Because we want a middle of the wall or slightly higher circuit here for TV, etc., and maybe a couple baseboard devices moved down, which would mean probably taking the home run in this box and going to that location with a new receptacle box, which looks like it would sit right between these two sticks, actually, right up here somewhere. Hopefully that works out. It looks like close to the middle of the wall even, which would be ideal. And so we should shorten the home run to there, and then with new routes of wire, go from there down to the floor and probably put a baseboard outlet there, maybe go left and go right, and thereby repopulate this circuit on that home run through all of those things. And that means when we cut these free from the ground fault receptacle here, then they could just be, if I can't get the wire pulled out of the wall, which I should be able to, it's probably just stapled to one time, especially I take the drywall off here, I can reach up and pull that staple. I can get the staple, whatever's holding it there. And that box and the corresponding wire routes to here could be kind of rolled up. And then we've got an upper and 2 or 3 lowers on that circuit. Boom, problem solved. Over here, I can't feel the way that these, where the wiring is, where these outlets are likely daisy chained to that, which may mean, it may mean that they have to stay. I mean, they really can't. So, I mean, worst case scenario, this one could stay as the one on the home run, if this is wired correctly, and turn into, well, either stay as single gang or go to a dual gang, but it'd have to stay at that elevation. It can't be dragged down to the floor or made any longer. However, if I was sure that these two daisy chain outlets were cut free of that and cut too short to ever be wired again, then I could cut this wire up, cut that wire up, and pack up those boxes and outlets, and that little bit of wire could hang out in the wall, and the home run for this circuit would go to just this outlet here, and the only issue with that is it isn't a baseboard elevation. So, I have to talk with Tim about what that would all mean, and if he's got to have a bigger change there, then I can't stretch that home run. It may make for a real issue, although maybe it's in this room. I don't know. That's going to be where we have a little bit of an issue there. However, the first order of business is to get the multimeter out and check for continuity between these outlets here to establish that they are indeed on the same circuit, and that's the situation here. Otherwise, all the thinking I just walked you through is for naught. So let's get that much done and then proceed. Okay, I just wanted to mention something that I realized could be a pitfall here, because you see me, I think, if it shows it, using these probes set to continuity, which is the little sound waves or whatever there, and you can check that you've got that happening. When the circuit's closed between the probes, it makes a beep. So then I'm pushing it into the outlet, from outlet to outlet hole. Everything's off, but you could do this when it's on, and I'm checking to see if it's got continuity. Although I think, at least I think you can do it when it's on. I wonder. Anyway, it's off, which is probably a safer bet. Power. So I'll be honest with you, I'd have to look that up as far as if you can do continuity checks when it's on. Power's on. So it's off, and I'm going hole to hole, and I had been thinking that, of course, this outlet and this outlet are on this circuit, and that this is the home run, and over here the home run's on the ground fault outlet there, and those are on that circuit. However, I was checking the small hole to small hole because that's the standard for the hot wire, which is actually what we're trying to check here. You're talking about it being daisy chained, the power coming from the panel to this outlet, going to that outlet and to that outlet or whatever. That's the hot. Common or neutral is the larger hole. It's the white wire, and that's common. That's, what I call it a lot of times by accident, but still it's neutral, but it's also, all of them are connected in a lot of cases before the panel, but at the very least, they're connected at the common bus on the panel. Whereas the hots each individually come from each individual breaker, see? So if you are doing as I'm doing and you don't realize, and you're checking from large hole to small hole, or even large hole to large hole, for whatever reason, thinking the power's on the large opening in the North America or an American outlet, you are going to get a false continuity because it's detecting that on the common the neutral, that they're all connected at the panel. You're going to still hear the bell ring, if that makes sense. So you got to make sure that you're not checking the neutral routes, the white routes, the silver screws. You're checking the gold screws, the small holes, and in general, the hot routes to see if you've got continuity. In a case like this, that's the actual check that we're doing. So hopefully that's clearer than it sounds now in retrospect. But my point is that you're checking the small holes, or the safer, more direct way to be sure what your check is go from the gold screw to the gold screw. And what's this ultimately come down to here? I discovered that is one circuit that supplies that outlet. And I want to say that outlet, but I can't check between them. My leads aren't long enough, because I know that outlet isn't on this circuit. And so now I'm going to check to see, because that's on that circuit. I expect that's on that circuit, and that one's on that circuit. So just because it's an odd number here, or excuse me, an even number here, they ended up with two on the same circuit next to one another, because obviously it seems as though they wanted circuit A, B, A, B, A, because that's B, and B is one of the hot routes. So I'll just establish that those are on the same circuit in terms of continuity on the gold screw here, and then I'm going to have to do some more thinking. Well, one of the benefits of designing as we go to some extent here is that I've been able to give Tim and his wife the opportunity to utilize these surfaces and like the island in this position for a couple of days now. And they've got some thoughts as far as, where to place the light fixture, where to place the island in space here, and how much distance to give themselves between the post and the surface here, how much distance to give themselves over here. And they're very comfortable at this point with the location that they've got, and we're pretty square in the room. He's made the toe kick, he connected all the boxes together, flushed all of the face frames up as well, and then attached it to the toe kick so the ends and stuff are flush, the overhangs are equal, etc. And so now, and it's square in the room, and we know that we're going to clad this with lumber. And so then, should the exact center line of this worktop be under the exact center line of the light fixture? Well, in theory, but frankly, it would mean that we'd have to move this island this way 3.5 inches. And it's also going to have a stone top hanging over it. And essentially right now, this is kind of their bare minimum travel for two back and forth. So you never want to close the distance. So we can be sure that the 3.5 inches that we are off of the centers, from center of island to center line of light fixture, I told him too, you know, you're never going to see that is the thing. And it also isn't an important, and this is where, you know, as a matter of fact, whether or not things are aligned like that, if it's necessary or important to design in any given situation, debatable. So again, you won't be able to really appreciate that it's not on the center line, and it won't really make that much of a difference. So the nice thing with the 3-plane laser is that I can put that right in the center line of the end to end, right on the actual center that we know we want to be on with that fixture box, and I can put the plumb cross points right on the ceiling, and I know that's exactly where I want the fixture box to be, and then I can go from there over to this elbow that we left in conduit with conduit, and then I know that if I fish over there with some THHN, individually insulated and sheathed conductors, I'll be in keeping with the NEC 2017, I think we've got to stick to. Anyway, that can get constructed, and I know that when we drop the fixture in, it'll be just where they want it when it comes down to this island. And we are going to then drill through the bottom of the box from above and through the subfloor. And then I'm going to mount an outlet. Now, we'll put it in the bottom, we'll put it in this shelf. So we'll put an old work box in the surface of this shelf facing up, 2 outlets, one of which the microwave will plug into, the other of which the outlet that pops out of the top will plug into, and that'll make for a nice clean installation. And we can do that rough-in plumbing for the electricity now because we know we're pretty much where we want to be with this island. So with all of that said, we can commence to making those commitments. It wouldn't be a dump trailer demo removal day if it wasn't raining outside. not a big deal. I don't tow all the time, and so I do little things like I make it so I can see the trailer in my rear view. And, you know, I don't want to forget that it's back there. You know, I'm cruising along with, you know, nearer to other people or with less margin for error or recording a video for YouTube. But, you know, you don't want to, it's happened before. I've been surprised to remember, especially when the trailer's loaded, that I'm not going to stop as quick as I might have thought because I've got 2 or 3 times the inertia. So, just a little tip there. Again, I can see that through my rear view. Old Blue, she's back there. So we're going to show up. We're going to throw everything in this trailer. We're going to try to flat pack as much as possible, be as economical as we can about the volume. Not to mention, I don't need stuff flying out of this thing, and I don't own it. And the rentals don't come with a tarp, which is kind of, it's the law. You're supposed to cover the load. So the last thing I need is something coming out of there because I haven't got it covered. So we'll probably start with carpet. We'll break down all the boxes, cupboards that, you know, Tim said he doesn't want to keep. And the ones that he will keep, we'll leave there. And I think probably a lot of the trim too, but we're going to get the lion's share of the crap jamming up the garage out of there today and dumped before 4 at the most economical place. It's like $75 a ton, but they will prorate. And so I expect to have the prorate after the first ton. So I'm normally with a full demo debris trailer, it's not a ton, and so it's almost always the flat rate or whatever the ton nominal fee is. So it'll be about 75, and that's a lot better than the 125 at Modern. This place is like a independent place that I like to go, so I got to get that stuff out of there and then over there and dumped, and then I return the trailer, and then I've got to stop and do an estimate or an initial meeting for a project for next year. So we won't touch on that unless I actually get a contract out of it. But it's a full day and it's already afternoon, so we got to get to the site and see if we can't pack that stuff out. Oh, the rain I'm talking about for driving, but I'm also going to be loading the trailer in the rain, which I love. Well, I chucked most of that. I took the full garbage bag in the dump trailer, get everything out of here that I can think of, put a fresh bag in there. Obviously carpet's gone. We got to find out how wide a room we can make and what size door opening we can do. They're kicking things off next week with that stuff. Dinette's moved in here for now. I'm not exactly sure of how much drywall I want to take just yet. I've been doing a little more figuring with these outlets. It's become more complicated than I realized. There are 2 breakers running the majority of these outlets. So somewhere somebody tied it together, and it's like a little confusing still. So I'll get back to you on that. The water's going to be straightforward enough, and I see now how it relates to the water upstairs to get it routed over there and down. But as far as the rest of the new kitchen, they're using it. They're figuring out where they want to place stuff. Like I said, we're pretty content with the island now. That allowed me to pull a center and figure out where the fixture goes there. And he's got his upper cabinets up and using some outlets. And, you know, we're able to fill she got her first pot that she filled with her new pot filler. So everything is really working out the way that we had hoped so far. Knock on wood. We've scheduled the measure for the stone tops, and all I've got to do now is wait for the couple different pop-up outlets that are available to show up, and we can handle them, feel, you know, how they work, see if there's a preference, see how large it is and what it would take to make it work in real life. Decide on one and basically rough install it. So when they come out to do the stone top measuring, the opening size and location and everything can be a part of that. And then that circle will be in the DXF line that the water jet cuts. It'll be cut as part of all of the cuts, and it'll be on the stone place if we have a fitment problem. That's the best way to go about it. They're also willing to wait and install or whatever, and we could cut that circle with a core bit, you know, after the fact. And I just don't want to muddy the water like that if I can help it. So hopefully that stuff arrives and we can decide before we got that measure scheduled. But I'm told that it'll allow us to put the count on the tops to be here before the Christmas holiday. So this is Thanksgiving week next week, and within a couple of weeks, you know, our measure will be on the 4th of December, and he says, you know, by the 20th or something, by the 15th, you'll be looking at the stone tops. They're not far from here, which is a help. So I've also got a few things. I got some more Rubio monocoat for Tim to do the rest of the woodwork in here. I got some tile samples. This is the first one to show up, and I'm thinking, I don't know if I'm thinking chevron or herringbone pattern, but mosaic with this long, thin, small tile has been on my mind for the backsplash. This is a little green, although not really green. I've got some other stuff coming that's definitely green, a couple different types of green. I just feel that with the bronze and brass and green tones, chef's kiss. I think that's key. And some of this Art Deco kind of patterning, and in some cases it could even be considered mid-century modern, and it's certainly stylish now. And I think that's a good indicator of something that's going to stand the test of time for a good long time here. And then Tim did, you know, work out that they want sort of a modern pull and maybe a longer than normal pull. And so he's got some here somewhere. I wish they were around. They're cool, but they're solid metal from Amazon, which I know that means they're pot metal, and then they're plated. This is from Signature Hardware, which I've always been a big fan of, especially for faucets and fixtures and plumbing stuff. But as far as handles and hardware, this is going to be solid brass. I mean, this is a $20 pull. And you can have them in one step longer than this, which might also be attractive for like $22 each. And yeah, there's a lot of money here in hardware, but Tim made his own cabinets. And I mean, we started out thinking the stone was going to be closer to $15,000, and we're at like $8,500 now for the stone with some wheeling and dealing. And, you know, there's a bunch of other things here. He's put in a couple hundred hours that he hasn't had to pay me to do stuff. So that's, you know, with my operation, if people are going to be very savvy like that, you can feel the difference here. Now, this isn't smell-o-vision, and you can't feel it through YouTube, but I encourage you, and it's why I got one of them for him to handle it. If you're thinking about Signature Hardware and you can't make your peace with the pricing, order it and take delivery and take it out of the box and get a sense of what it is you're talking about here. It's a cut above, especially for things not necessarily just Signature Hardware, but they deal in solid brass, high-end stuff. Restoration Hardware is another one, places like that. Solid brass. And, you know, the difference is in actually touching it. And with handles and faucets and things that you do day after day after day, handle and deal with and touch and cycle. Again and again, I always suggest that people go with the higher end stuff because it will last a nice long time, and the experience with your investment that you'll have will be commensurate with what you spent. If you cheap out on the things that you touch and that are supposed to work right along, even though you went with full 3/4 inch thick shelves and solid plywood boxes and all this stuff like that, that is a nice feature, but you don't directly deal with that all the time, right? So when it comes down to the things that you touch and interact with, make a big investment there, I said. And Tim really took it to heart, and he really went with some nice stuff here. We got this system of stuff for this corner cabinet, just hundreds and hundreds of dollars. That soft close. All of his drawer slides are just gorgeous. High-end, smooth action. And the garbage system that he went with here, all of that stuff is another nice brand of stuff. So, and we got that nice under sink cabinet mat. I also, the covers I think we looked at for the registers. I've got some Signature Hardware ones coming that are solid steel and plated. You can have them brass and stuff too. I forget why I went that route with steel, but you certainly don't touch them. But I really wanted something nice and not just stamped steel, but something that's a cut above. So we'll look at that stuff when it shows up. Obviously this Kohler stuff, the quality of this sink basket and this faucet and everything as compared to, what's on the shelf at Lowe's and Home Depot, just nice stuff. So really excited to see those investments coming out to be, showcased in this renovation. We're going to do some more things that are, again, out of reach that you can't touch, that are going to tie in those colors. And then in that backsplash is where they're going to make, I'm hoping they're going to make a big move on color. And because everything else in here is pretty neutral. And I told them, you can see down the road, if you really feel the kitchen needs an update, you can cut right in place and take out the drywall and the tile and walk it right out of here. You see I had 2 or 3 major pieces of that stuff. Pretty quick and easy, not a lot of muss, not a lot of fuss. Of course, you have to take the faucet off and stuff most likely, or potentially be able to do that around it. But then you can come in with exactly the same sized pieces of drywall, put fresh board up, but you haven't got to do any mudding or taping or anything, because you can just tile that, and then when you finish the edge of the tile with aluminum extrusion or whatever it is that you're going to use there, essentially that disappears. Or worst case scenario, you tape across the top so you don't have to play a game to disguise it, but you certainly haven't got to tape the bottom, and it's quick and easy to do. And basically over a weekend or two, you can completely facelift a kitchen like this one, because the only real statement is in the choice of the tile, the color and the style and all of that. So I think that it's worth jumping in with something a little bold here. We've also been talking about tapering the hood just ever so slightly. And then we were thinking that we plan on the tile, the backsplash coming along, and then for the width of this cutout and the stove, the tile would go up the wall to the hood. And then, like I said, the hood, we're talking about maybe very slight taper. I've also been considering carrying that taper right along the hood and then right down the layout of the tile to where it intersects the elevation that the backsplash is at. So the whole thing takes a very slight angle tipping in. I think too much is a different look, but a very slight amount, pretty chic. One of those things that you don't think about until the very end. But in set building and stuff where I have carte blanche, I do something like that, and I think it really, really ups the whole thing, elevates it. And so I'm going to run that by them and see what they think about it. And it would mean, especially with that chevron or some of that more complicated tile, I would apply the thin set here very carefully to the area that we intend to be backsplash and put that pattern on right now, running long, because again, our actual counter material is 1.5 inches, 1.25 inches, and this is 1/2 inch. So we have a 3/4 inch material here that is yet to be, in the way. In fact, we could even slide the plywood away. What am I saying? We could put the thin set up just exactly where the backsplash is going to be and put down the tile, the mosaic tiles, in the kind of configuration that we're going to use, utilizing the location of the thin set to make sure that we're over it everywhere, all the way around. And then I can stick a straight edge to that, and I can use my little Milwaukee cutoff and just take the edge off of all of those, cut the straight elevation across the top. And in fact, because if we do it before the stone is installed, I can set up straight edge here and follow it right along and cut it perfectly so that basically the stone installs right underneath that, and it's just got enough clearance to caulk it really nicely or install a little bit of aluminum inside molding with a little adhesive to make that transition nice and clean and smooth. So maybe that's the way that we do a tile backsplash first and then do the counter later, and allow us to make some pretty snazzy stuff happen by being smart instead of trying to meet up with an angled line or with the counter and having to cut each of these and then stick it up and then make another cut on the next one and stick it up. I think that's stupid if we can avoid it. So sometimes we don't do what it is that I say I'm planning on doing, but I'll throw that out there. For now, we're done for the week. Let's go dump that crap and then we can cut out of here. What?
I'm watching you.
What are you doing over there? Ooh, careful. You're wrecking the place. All right, well, we're pursuing a level of finish on site in the real world, and we're just looking at options here in the model. There's some things that haven't changed away from what we've already decided and some things that are still in the air. But, you know, as discussed, the taper to the hood and to the tiling layout, talking about where the backsplash is going to go, and producing some renderings of that model so that we can have some discussions about those things and whether or not we'll finish the hood and, you know, what we will and won't try to accomplish here. But we did a complete startup, albeit a little bit shaky. Thank you guys for hanging out for all of that. There are some segments that should have been time-lapse that weren't. There's some segments that were recorded that I thought were real speed and turned out to be time-lapse that had to be thrown out. I cleared off my phone before realizing it, so the edit had to be done on the computer and stuff. So anyway, this has been a real couple of weeks now trying to get everything completed so that these folks can make themselves a dish to pass for Thanksgiving. Now we're all going to have a nice little holiday, and we'll come back afterwards and keep things moving here. But for now, thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you.